So my name's Phil Mitchell. I get a lot of EastEnders jokes, as you can imagine. And I've been working as a therapist for about 15 and a half years, predominantly working with boys and men who've experienced sexual abuse, exploitation, other forms of sexual abuse, either as children, as adults, or as both. I deliver a lot of training on various aspects of the sexual abuse and exploitation of boys and young men, which includes how we can identify more boys, gender-biased practice, techniques that work with boys and young men, and I've developed and contribute to various strategies and initiatives to tackle the sexual abuse and exploitation of boys and men. So what I'd like to talk about for the next few minutes is the challenges that boys and men often face when it comes to the sexual abuse that they experience, specifically in regards to disclosing that they've been abused, recognising that they've been abused, and engaging with services. So one of the biggest problems is that a lot of boys and men do not recognise that what they are experiencing or have experienced is sexual abuse, exploitation, etc. It's certainly an interesting issue when we talk about female perpetrators. I've certainly worked with a number of boys and men, and they've told me how they have been treated by their wives, girlfriends, or other women in their lives, and a huge percentage have not seen it as abuse. And sometimes I will ask the question, if you were a girl or a woman telling me what you've just told me, who had gone through what your partner's done to you, but your partner was a man, what would that be like for you? And a lot of the times you see the faces change, their eyes wide, and they gasp. And I said, I'm just noticing that that's a different reaction. And some of them will go, yeah, I suppose it's true. What she's done to me is not okay. Some still dismiss it and play it down and go, yeah, but you know, it's all right for women to hit men, isn't it? It's all right. It's not really abuse. And then we explore that, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the statistics and the data around boys and men that are being or have been abused by girls and women, it's all a little bit inaccurate. Anything we talk about in regards to data and stats is only really as good as what we know. If we look at the Office of National Statistics, it's all data predominantly from what is recorded and reported. Well, it's well documented that there are issues facing boys and men that prevent them from disclosing abuse, from recognising it, and from engaging with services. There are vast amounts of research papers, studies, and so on that back this up. I'm certainly not saying that girls and women also don't have their issues that affect them, that prevent them from disclosing and engaging. Of course they do. However, in my opinion, society seems to be giving girls and women the message that you don't deserve this, speak up, get help, get support, make sure the perpetrator is accountable for the crimes. You don't deserve it. And I don't think that society in general is giving boys and men the same message. For example, we have a violence against women and girls strategy in this country. We don't have a violence against men and boys strategy in this country, despite the fact that the vast majority of people who do die from violence is boys and men. I heard something the other day where Scotland is considering making misogyny a hate crime, but not misandry. There are schools all over the country, and some of them are absolutely amazing. Some, sadly, have an approach which is rather problematic. They will educate groups of girls on child sexual exploitation, the signs of grooming, what to do if you think it's happening to you or your friend, who to tell, how to get support, and empowers them to go, you don't deserve this, speak up. And I'm fully in support of that. What I'm not in support of is how often the same schools will only be teaching groups of boys about consent, get consent, display sexually appropriate behaviour. And my view is that actually we should be teaching all girls and all boys that sadly you can be vulnerable to abuse. Here are the signs to look out for, and here's who to tell if you think it's happening to you or your friend. And girls and boys, it's really important that you make sure you understand consent and that you get it, rather than we just do this for girls and this for boys. And I think it promotes a really problematic narrative that simply says girls are victims, boys are perpetrators. Girls are never perpetrators, boys are never victims. So when you are a boy and you realise that you've been abused, what are you meant to do? What are you meant to do when life and society and everything has told you up to that point you should never be abused? It doesn't happen to you. How confusing will that be? And I think that's something we need to consider. When it comes to disclosures, there are some problems around that as well. So when let's look at child sexual exploitation services that were set up in the late 90s, for example. Again, some fantastic services out there. However, they were predominantly set up for girls and young women. And then what happened is a few boys started to disclose, or a few boys were identified as experiencing sexual abuse and exploitation, or they were identified as being at risk of these crimes, or they had experienced these crimes. And what would happen is this boy would be sent to his local child sexual exploitation service. He would walk into the building, and straight away he's met with an abundance of pink decorations, pink scatter cushions, toys in the corner with sort of dolls and My Little Pony and things like that. The magazines on the table are all sort of shiny, glitzy pink girl magazines. Posters on the wall, girls group this Thursday. Poster over here saying, "Does he hit you?" with a picture of a girl crying, "Get help." And I think it's reasonable to say that many boys who walk into that environment could, on some level, think, I shouldn't be here. And it's not about necessarily making services gender neutral, although there is some discussion to be had around that perhaps. It's about giving services that say they work with girls and boys. It's about making them inclusive of girls and boys explicitly. So don't just maybe say we support children and young people, say we support girls and boys. If you've got a poster of girls over here, have a poster of boys over here. Make it inclusive of all genders, rather than just adding boys on as a sort of afterthought, because that will contribute to boys and young men thinking, I shouldn't be here, I don't need to be here. Another problem is that we often sit down with some of these boys and men and say, open up, talk about your feelings. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think it can work for many males and females, but to have that approach and expect it to always work for boys and men that have experienced abuse, it will not work. It just won't. What we need to do is adapt our approach to fit with the person we're working with, male or female. Many boys and men who have experienced abuse, certainly the ones that I see, want to do something about it. And I've lost count of so many boys and men I've seen over the years where they've said, I saw this therapist or a support worker and he or she was lovely, but we just sat and we just talked and we didn't do anything. And there is, quite a lot of data out there that suggests, boys and men in general are predisposed to take action, to want to do something. And when you're sitting with them and talking about their emotions, some, maybe even a lot of boys and men will disengage. And as I said, I've certainly seen boys and men that have experienced abuse that have come to therapy because their previous therapist wasn't helping them to sort of take action, and that's what they wanted. And so sometimes, using words, the sort of what are often called male-friendly words, can be useful. So I'll give you an example. So my website, when I first developed my website, it was all very much talk about your feelings, open up, and all of this. And it was kind of okay. When I read the Palgrave Handbook of Male Psychology, which is an absolutely amazing book and is a must-read for anyone working with boys and men, it completely opened my eyes. And not only did I see that actually there are traits of masculinity that can be very positive and healthy and used in an amazing way, I also saw that changing the language I used with boys and men could be a really good step. So rather than saying, come to therapy, open up, express your feelings, I started saying, come to therapy, take action, and take control of your situation. I saw a significant increase in men getting in touch, saying, I want therapy, I want this, I want this. And with the men that I finished working with, I kind of asked, a little bit of an evaluation, why did you pick me? What was that about? What's been useful? What haven't you found useful? And a lot of them were saying, well, it's two things they said. Action. We did things. We talked about what I can do, what action I can take, and understanding. So now I understand why, as a terrified 10-year-old child, I didn't hit my perpetrator in the face. I now understand from a brain point of view, because you've explained it to me, why I didn't do that. So I often find that with boys and men who've experienced abuse, whether it's recently or historically, they seem to respond very well to action orientated approaches and understanding the why. Now, again, I'm generalizing here. There are, of course, boys and men that won't like that approach. I generally find that most of them, in my experience, do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes I think what we have to do as therapists and practitioners is stop and think, is my approach the right approach for this client, for this man, for this boy? And if you get a sense that actually they're not responding, they're not talking, or don't keep trying the approach. Stop and go, okay, I'm really noticing that I'm trying to get you to open up here. I'm trying to get you to explore your feelings, and I'm getting one-word answers, and I'm wondering what's going on for you. And if they go, well, yeah, I don't really like this, it's really not for me, okay, try a different approach, explore what could work with them. So there is a lot of science and a lot of research behind adopting that approach to work with boys and men.